Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Toss today here from the United States and infinitely galactic IG from Australia. Well, IG, this week marks the 2-year anniversary of the very first podcast. I guess we are doing something right.
I seriously still can't believe that. It's hard to believe that, yeah, 2 years ago we started doing these collaborative podcasts, just talking about whatever came to mind, whatever was popular in Linux news or and technology news in general. And it's really spiraled from there, hasn't it?
Yes.
You've had lots of people on your show, and
Yeah.
Spatry's gotten involved a number of times. We've had a number of members from the community, the Linux distro communities, jumped behind it. It's been a very good venture, I would say.
Yeah, we started this. I had to look it up this evening. I believe the first one was May 30th, 2011. It was just a random topic show just out of the blue. That show, if I recall, ran over 2 hours. It was unbelievable the amount of content we had. The content I shortened it to I think two parts in less than 2 hours. But I mean, look, it worked. Things clicked. People seemed to enjoy listening. We had things in common, and yeah, yeah. So
Here
here
we
we
are two
are.
years
Yeah,
later, doing it all again.
I never would have thought this would happen this way, but I'm glad it has. Of course, doing the various, A teams, Linux A teams, and some of the PCA teams with you, Spatry, Twill, some of the live shows on the LDC. And speaking of Spatry, he's texting me back. I guess he's still busy, reviewing one of the distros. But of course, doing the news and nonsense with Spatry. That one clicked. I think you and I and him did a few of those together. Very funny ones. Uh,
Yes,
we
absolutely.
we need to do more of those. Those are for those of you who don't know, news and nonsense how it works. At least how I like to do them. They're they're the Sunday night news and nonsense report, the Sinner report, as a joke, and we will pick two or three news items. But generally speaking, I don't like to give out what I'm going to say, or at least my nonsense stuff, because I just like to blurt it out as a surprise and get a response from you or Spatry, and that's what seems to work the best. Nothing is rehearsed, usually. So,
Absolutely. We
yeah,
usually have just really alternative or left of field news topics that might be entertaining and bounce them around the room and just see what happens.
exactly. And yeah, I mean, really, from that first podcast, TosCast as I call it, it's been morphed into several other things, and I'm very grateful to have, of course, people like you, Spatry, Twill, and a host of others to really make this completely informative, of course, and totally enjoyable. So for tonight, let's talk a little bit about Linux. You uploaded something on Gentoo. Now fill me in. I mean, my channel is for newbies, but what makes Gentoo so, say, like special?
Well, I've got to say, actually, the inspiration of doing a Gentoo video came entirely from my audience. They were practically saying that, hey, you're a Linux guy, you've done a lot of, great videos on a bunch of different distros, but you haven't really looked at Gentoo before. So is it about time you had a look at some?
Okay.
And so I agreed with them, and I downloaded Gentoo and I started to read up about it. I installed it in a few different scenarios, and I, tried it out, tried installing software, tried different desktop environments, really
Yeah.
tried to get familiar with the whole way Gentoo works. And I can definitely see that for the people that know what they're doing, for the people that like having that almost infinite level of control over their system, over the software, how it's compiled, and all that, it really can reap a lot of benefits performance-wise.
Okay.
And if you have a system that is, I guess, configured very, very specifically, it
Okay.
really cuts down on the amount of time it takes to install software. Because without that, oh my gosh, it's so slow
Hmm.
to install software because you're compiling everything from source, and it's full grassroots nitty gritty stuff. So having said all that, it is a wonder of engineering, and it definitely gives you a greater appreciation for the distributions that do all this stuff for you, like Linux Mint and Ubuntu and
Okay.
Zorin and all those newbie
Right.
friendly ones. So, I mean, for me, the real appeal behind Gentoo, at least for me, was just simply discovery, and
Okay.
I think that's what started my whole journey into Linux. Anyway, was just wanting to learn stuff and wanting to try stuff out. So, from a pure discovery standpoint, I had a lot of fun, and I certainly learned quite a bit through it as well. So, I'm
Okay.
hoping that the video that I put up is going to help other people know what it is, what it does,
Yeah.
and who it's for. Because ultimately, that was what was initially confusing about
Hmm.
Gentoo, was that I just didn't really know much about it. And
Okay.
there's some great documentation, but there wasn't really any videos apart from like install tutorials and things
Right.
like that.
Right. Right. So really, Gentoo, you would put it in the same ballpark as say with Arch in terms of what's
Yeah,
involved. Okay.
very, very similar, very similar. Gen 2 is slightly more complicated, slightly
Okay.
more involved customization wise. But yeah, it's in the same ballpark. If you've used Arch for a while, then you're going to be pretty comfortable going into Gen 2, that's for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
But you know, if you have time to invest in reading
Okay.
documentation, getting to learn about it, then you'll be all right.
I've dabbled a wee bit. I downloaded an Arch distribution that's somewhat for newbies called Manjaro, and
Yes, great distribution.
yeah, and it said on their website it's designed for newbies. Of course, I was curious, and I have it inside a VirtualBox, and it's not that bad. There are well since the last one, I'm sure there are updates and updated newer versions of Manjaro that might be even easier. But I tinkered with it, and like I must say this, even inside a virtual machine, Manjaro Linux based on Arch absolutely flies. I mean, I'm really impressed by the speed. It does take some getting used to in terms of, like you say, the tweaking and this and that. It's not that difficult, but it's not as easy as, say, Ubuntu base, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and Zorn. But I was impressed by the speed of Manjaro. And from what I understand, when it comes to Arch and maybe even Gentoo, maybe speed is where it's at.
Absolutely. There's something to be said for the performance gains that you get from a very, you know, minimal build desktop like Arch or Gentoo or distributions based off of that.
Okay. I did what did I download? Oh, I downloaded the release candidate for Linux Mint, the Mate edition or Mate or whatever it's called. I will test Cinnamon. What could I say, IG? I think Linux Mint Mate to me is the new GNOME 2 for those of us like myself who missed, the GNOME 2 interface, being able to right click, say, on the panel and add applets like a weather applet or whatever you want to, and that simple customization, multiple system, simple customization features that is not quite the same in GNOME Shell or Unity. They've done a terrific job, taking GNOME 2 into the future and calling it Mate, but I tested it. I didn't really read all the newer features in it. To me, it looks the same, but that's okay because it's extremely easy to use. And personally, I still like the Mint menu. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned, but to me, it looks great. It works the way it's supposed to. It's stable. It's fast. I haven't tested Cinnamon yet, but from what I actually have Cinnamon also, the previous version. That tends to be still. It is getting better, a little bit slower, slightly more buggy, and in my opinion, not as simple to use as Linux Mint Mate.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. For me, like you were saying about the Mint menu, that was one of the biggest things that I really liked about Linux distributions when I first started using them. My very first Linux distro that I was using on a regular basis was Linux Mint 8. And to be honest, to be able to look at what Linux Mint 8 was and now be able to fast forward to Linux Mint 15
Yes.
and still see a consistent interface across the two of those, the main edition of Linux Mint 8 and then the Mate edition of Mint 15. That is really some solid work. And I know that they sometimes get a bit of a hard rap for being stuck
Yeah.
in the past and all this
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's really important that at least one person or one group, one community in this ever-changing world of evolution and distros, you know, going on to the next thing keep that consistency across, that many
Yes.
releases. And, for the user that just wants to get work done, they really don't care about evolution and innovation.
Right.
That's a wonderful thing. And, they do deserve some props for that, as well as, they're not ignoring the other crowd. They keep
Right.
developing Cinnamon and
Right.
adding features to it. So, I really
Yeah.
think they're doing a very good job of balancing, both of those worlds. And it's great that they have the resource team to pull that off relatively successfully.
Well, they're listening to the consumers, to the users like myself, and I mean personally, like you said, personally, like I think it was brilliant bringing back the GNOME 2 interface because a lot of people missed it. But they've also, added some newer things such as Cinnamon. I think they still develop KDE, if I'm not mistaken, and I think they still make a light version, XFCE. So there are choices, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I still recommend Linux Mint, any flavor of Linux Mint. Well, maybe except Debian. I'm not sure if that's for newbies, but the XFCE, KDE, Linux Mint Mate, my favorite. Cinnamon, if you are a newbie, sure, give those a shot. I still continue to have my default desktop. What I'm using now is still Unity, and I think that's what you use still, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, that's very true.
Okay. I actually, this evening, I just downloaded the latest Zorin OS. Is it number 7? The release candidates. I will be testing that.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that probably for the ultimate, newbie, dummy, however, and I use that as a figure of speech, probably to jump right in and get started. Maybe Zorin because at least it looks like Windows. It's not, but if something looks familiar, you are probably more inclined to stick with it and learn something. And then from there, you can say graduate to, Linux Mint or Ubuntu, and who knows what else. But the Zorin team also has to be given much, much credit to keeping it simple. And everything usually works out of the box. They have multiple editions. I think the educational edition, multimedia, the core, the light edition, I believe, based on Ubuntu. And all of those should be fine. But look, Linux Mint team, the Zorin team, Ubuntu, you have to give them credit. They've taken Linux into the future and made it and have made it at least a viable alternative to Windows 7 and of course Windows 8. Although I still think Windows 8 is not that bad, but that's probably for like a different topic altogether. But for newbies, stick with Ubuntu Unity, in my opinion. Zorn, Linux Mint, any one of those flavors, you should be fine because it usually tends to work out of the box. I know sometimes we'll talk about Gentoo and Arch, but that's really not designed for newbies, as we stated. Maybe if you tend to stick with Linux and years down the line, if you want to, branch on and move on and try those, that's fine. But for myself, at least, I still enjoy Linux Mint, Mate, and Ubuntu Unity. I love the dash in Unity. Just search for something, bang, it's there, and you can add lenses if you want, and all this kind of stuff. Somebody did ask IG, is it necessary to upgrade all the time? Between what do we have? 1204 now. It's what 1304.
For sure, yeah.
Right.
It's in like, oh, sorry, I wasn't answering the question about upgrading. I mean, I'm
Yes.
going to be looking at that in a future episode of In Galactic's Opinion because I have been asked that question a few times, and I think it would, it deserves a decent look as to the
Yes.
reasons why you should upgrade or not.
Right.
But essentially, yeah, it's a tough one because the long-term support release, for me, I'm still hanging on to my long-term support
Yes.
release, and that's my production system. That's what I do all
Yes.
my, video editing on. Anything that's mission critical, I'm doing on
Yes.
that distribution. And I've tossed up reinstalling, something newer over the top of it. I was using Ubuntu 13.04 for quite some time
Okay.
on my test partition, and I'm still going back to 1204 whenever I need to get work done because
Yes.
it's
Right.
there. I've been using it for more than a year now, and it's
Right.
still going just as
Right.
well as it was from day one. So that to me is invaluable for the sort of stuff that I'm doing. But I guess it just comes down to personal preference. But like I said, I'll probably deal with that in a future episode and give it some more thought.
Let me give my answer as a multimedia person, okay, doing these videos and podcasts. You can't beat the comfort of knowing something that just works, okay, such as Ubuntu 12.04 LTS. If you try something new or upgrade to something new because hey, it looks different, it's nicer, it's faster, there's always that possibility that stuff, apps that work in the past may not work now. And do you really want to take the time to find a solution, fix it, tweak it? I don't. Okay. Now, uh, if I'm going from LTS to LTS, why not? But from 12.04 to 12.10, there really wasn't enough there for me to, dump everything to a hard drive, do a fresh install, and then reinstall all my apps, or 1304. Yes, it has gone incrementally better, but not enough for me to start over to reinstall the next version. So my advice really for newbies, unless it's absolutely necessary, meaning what you have now, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, it's buggy, it's slow, and it's necessary, then you should upgrade to the next version. But as you said, and what I say, we just like to stick with something that works. The video editing, the audio editing, whatever that we do, it's nice to fall back to something I know this is going to work at least 9 times out of 10. Sure, every once in a while, Caden Live crashes. I think with your last one, you had some minor issues with the audio or something.
Yeah, yeah, with the previous video, yeah. I
Right.
was doing some panning and zooming and stuff, and so I just
Gotcha.
tripped it out a bit too far.
Okay. But for the most part, for me, 90% of the time, Caden Live, which is what I use exclusively, it works. 90 to 95% it works. If I upgrade to 1304, will it work? Or will it drop down to, say, 70% usage or 80%? I don't want to take that chance, but that's my personal opinion. I stick with what works. 5 year support is awesome. Now, next year, when the next LTS is released, if there are really nice wow features, sure, I'll do 14, what is it, 1404, whatever it is, next LTS, why not? But probably, IG, most newbies don't even have to do that. They're probably going to be happy with something that just works and is, supported for 5 years, just to keep it simple. So,
That's right. That's right. And look, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously we talk about Ubuntu a lot on this show specifically because of the fact it is such a huge market share distribution. It does have, a corporate entity behind it for better or for worse. There's always
right,
going to be that debate.
right.
But honestly, the sheer market share of where Ubuntu has taken the Linux desktop, I think a lot of this wouldn't have been possible without their investment, without their, sometimes their politics being a bit
Yes,
dictatorship.
yes,
None of this would have been possible without a company like Canonical stepping up and really pushing Ubuntu to the masses.
yeah,
So I think for that they do deserve credit. But having said that, if you are the sort of person that doesn't like what they're doing, and obviously we do talk about Ubuntu a lot, there are great alternatives out there,
right,
and even if you want to avoid Ubuntu completely, as its derivatives like Linux Mint and Zorin are
right,
also based off that.
right.
The best distribution that I found for that recently actually is Mageia. Mageia recently released their third release,
Hmm.
and I've got to say, it's apart from if Ubuntu never existed, Mageia would be my favorite Linux distribution right now. Because it's just a solid Linux distribution that provides everything the community wants,
Okay.
and it's got great repositories, great software support, and really great hardware support. And setting it up was just a breeze. I think they're number 3 on
Wow.
DistroWatch at the moment, after Mint and
Okay.
Ubuntu. So they've got to be doing something right. And I've only just been playing around with it for the last few days, and it's really solid.
I have not tested Magia yet, but is that something for newbies or not?
I would say it is, yeah.
Okay.
It's I would say it's more like a Linux. It's definitely not Zorin newbie or
Hmm.
like Ubuntu newbie, but it's
Okay.
definitely anybody that's been working with a computer will know what to do, and it seems to have enough support and documentation to
Okay.
get people over the line. So yeah, it's a very solid distribution.
I was just thinking maybe one of these days I need to clarify like what the difference is, say, between a Linux dummy and a Linux newbie. And I was just thinking about it, and I would say, and of course, when I say dummy to all the listeners, I say that with all the respect and friendship that friendship I can possibly give you. But probably to me, a Linux dummy is someone who has never heard of Ubuntu, never heard of a distro, just knows absolutely zero. Maybe that's a Linux dummy. Um, a Linux newbie, maybe IG, is someone who maybe saw Ubuntu on a video, a magazine, has gone to DistroWatch, maybe tried downloading something and got lost. Maybe, to define what is what. Maybe that's a newbie versus a dummy who knows who's starting from scratch. Of course, you could probably put that person in the newbie category too. But anyway, sometimes I get, comments, why are you calling us dummies or this? I said, no, 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 that's just a figure of speech. That's just my channel is for newbies, dummies, new users. But it was just a thought, top of my head, if I had to distinguish between a Linux dummy or a Windows dummy for that matter, or a Mac dummy, and a Linux newbie. A Linux dummy is someone who's just pure starting from scratch. Linux newbie maybe has read it in a book, has gone to DistroWatch, has browsed the web, knows what Ubuntu is, has never tried it, or maybe has tried it. Anyway, I just wanted to, throw that out there so you listeners know where I'm coming from.
Mm.
Um, I do
And there is
occasion,
great value in that.
yes. Well, there really isn't. I've yet to see a channel like mine, which is, I hope it's still somewhat unique, that, for someone who asks any question, no matter how, you know, stupid, well, maybe that's a bad way to, how noobish the question is, you will be treated with friendship and respect from me, from IG, and, and from all of us, really from the Linux 8 team, just to keep it simple. But I'm here that if you have a question, you ask it. I may not have an immediate answer. If I don't, I'll point you in the right direction. But look, IG, we all had to start somewhere, right? you know,
Absolutely.
Someone had to point us, or maybe we took the initiative, but in the end, we had to ask for help from someone down the line. And for me, for my channel, I think it's just a starting point. But for newbies out there, you may have, maybe in the past have gone to maybe to a not so friendly forum, or someone commented, maybe left mean comments. I won't do that. Okay. I understand where you come. I started off as a dummy back in when was the first time I heard of Ubuntu? Back in 2005. I started off as quote a dummy, and then graduated to newbie, and now here I am now. But for those of you who are maybe a little bit scared to try because you don't want to be deemed or seem like a fool, no, no, you're okay. You come to me, come to IG for that matter. He knows more about Linux than me. I mean, I dual boot. But, I just wanted to toss that out there. We're here, I'm here, and I'm grateful for the channel that's, still here. Of course, grateful for all my podcast, partners. But anyway, I believe we were talking about Magia. So you said it is possibly for newbies, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Okay.
it's not entirely like you're coming up from scratch and you want to try something completely new. If you've been around computers for a while, you'll be fine.
Okay.
But for those who are just checking the email, surfing the web, yeah, it's better to start with all the Ubuntu ones, and
Probably.
then if you're wanting to move on
Right.
or past the Ubuntu camp, then Mageia is a great spot to sit.
Cool. How about if we finish up, maybe talk a little bit about gaming? I was able last night, what I had done, I jumped on the LDC, and then from there in the Google Hangouts, I was talking to a few members there. We talked a half hour, maybe an hour, about the upcoming Xbox One. I saw the reveal, the preview of it. It looks fantastic. Voice control, gesture control, 8 cores, 8 gig of RAM. But then there was, I don't know the finalization of this console yet, but the rumors are you have to be connected online all the time. I'm not sure I like that. You will not be able to play used games. I'm not sure I like that either. If you go to a friend's house to play the game, you'll have to pay to play it again. Again, these are just rumors. If that's true, I don't like that either. But we had talked about it last night. I wish I was recording it. I would. This was just spur of the moment, one of those things, just a couple of friends getting together. But you don't have an Xbox, right?
No, actually, but funnily enough, my unit mate here on campus, he's got an Xbox, so I've been playing around with them for a little while.
Okay. And what do you think of the 360 as it stands now?
An incredible piece of work that it came out in 2005 and it's still going.
Okay.
Like that to me is amazing. In the world, if you rewind the clock back to 2005 and think of
Yeah.
all the things that we didn't have,
Right.
and then look at the Xbox 360 and realize that there are games that are still coming out for it, it's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Fair enough. Yeah, I have the Xbox 360. It really for now it handles all of my gaming needs. Of course, some of the people out there know I love playing Halo. And speaking of Halo, if you didn't know, for all the Halo fans, there was an announcement that Steven Spielberg, of course the famous Hollywood director, is going to help produce the Halo TV series. That's all that was revealed. I'm not sure what it will be called. I was hoping for a full-blown movie or full feature movie. But anyway, that's on Halo. But yeah, as far as the Xbox, the 360, it works. It's fairly inexpensive. At least this model is. This one, the slim line starts at $200, 200 US dollars, and you can add to it, of course. But getting back to the Xbox One, I can just imagine, with the 8 cores and 8 gig of RAM, the 500 gigabyte hard drive, voice control. From what I saw, IG, Microsoft wants to make this a complete all-in-one entertainment box. That is ultra convenient in my opinion. Whether Microsoft made one or Ubuntu makes one, whoever, that is super convenient. Now, the other stuff, all the politics involved, I don't know. I will reserve final thoughts on the final release or the official, specs of the product. But maybe we can do that, on a future Gamers podcast. But that's what I have on that. I just wanted to get your thoughts. You said you played with the 360. It is a marvelous piece of machinery. I mean, that's regardless of who makes it. As far as PC games go, very little. I don't play that much in Windows or Linux. So I think Steam, the Steam client, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. I think it's terrific. I don't think you can quite compare it to Windows PC games yet, but IG, that may change in the future. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Absolutely. And I'll be keen to see what happens with the Xbox One. As far as game compatibility, also with the fact that they're saying that you probably won't be able to, well, you
Right,
definitely won't be able to play old games as it stands just because of the architecture difference between the two
right,
consoles. But
right, right.
yeah, I'm going to be interested to see what happens with it. Obviously, I imagine at some point I'll get my hands on one and,
Mm,
and my
yes.
thoughts will have to wait until then.
Yeah, that was another thing. Apparently, zero backwards compatibility, and I'm like, even Halo won't be able to play in this. I mean, the game that really put the Xbox on the map. I find that hard to believe, but I believe the more news will come out of this the E3 show. I believe in LA coming up next month in June. Uh,
I'd say it will be a case of, like digital, you might not be able to like buy the physical disc of the
hmm
game, but
Right.
I imagine that eventually they'll probably, especially the popular games like
Yes.
Halo, they'll probably port them to the new architecture and just have them available for,
Possibly.
download or something like
Possibly.
that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think what we'll do, I think we'll wait till we get the next piece of news as far as the Xbox goes, Xbox One, and of course I had to crack a joke. They've gone from the 360 to one. That sounds like a downgrade, but
Yeah, it does.
it does, doesn't it? They went all the way backwards, but
And what happened? Like all of a sudden, PlayStation's releasing the PlayStation 4 and Xbox is only releasing the Xbox One. Like,
right,
oh.
right. I mean, personally, I think Xbox One to me doesn't grab me. Call it the Xbox universe, or the Xbox Infinity, or you know what I mean. But
Yeah,
the
there was
Xbox
lots
One,
of name options out there,
yeah.
and they
But
just stuck with the boring one.
well, I understand one for all your needs and all for one. Okay, fine. If you want to keep it simple, and I suppose keeping it simple sometimes isn't too bad. But sorry, Microsoft, it sounds boring. Okay. But we'll talk about this maybe here next month once we get more news on the Xbox One, and maybe we can talk a little more about Linux gaming and Steam. But we will do and maybe get some other guests on who are more into gaming than we are, and maybe do a gamers podcast if you want to.
Absolutely.
All right, IG, that's all I have for this evening. I know I think you said you need to leave soon, but that's all that I have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still think we covered a pretty broad range of topics there.
Yeah, yeah,
So, once again, thank you very much for having me on the show, and to all the listeners that tune in and listen to this stuff. It's great to be a part of this, and it's hard to believe that it's been 2 years, but nevertheless, the audience can comment on, I don't know, their favorite episode from the last
yeah,
2 years or whatever. Obviously, having you and Spatry and Twill and others on the show
yeah.
definitely spices it up and adds value to it. And it's definitely made this corner of the YouTube community quite a bit smaller. So yeah, I think it's been a good thing.
I'm very grateful. I never would have thought that these podcasts and what has branched out would be here 2 years. Thank you, and to all my podcast partners, you all know who you are. Let's continue doing these, and maybe we could do a best of podcasts one of these days. Of course, I'll have to go back and listen to them all. This may take some time, but I think that might be fun. So, but yeah, thank you, IG, for coming back on. Um, that's all I have for now. We will keep doing these as much as we can. I know. Are you still in school? Back in
Yes, I
school?
am. I have another, well, about 6 months. I graduate in December.
Wonderful. Cool. Okay. Yeah, we'll keep the listeners posted as to what's going on. And IG, that's all I have. So if you would like to take us out.
Yeah, for sure. Once again, if you're wanting to check out either one of our channels, you can check out Toss Today's channel, which is the channel, of course, on which you are watching this video. My channel will be around the video somewhere, and feel free to check my stuff out as well. And also, you can keep in contact with us on Google Plus, or for me, also Twitter, Facebook, and I think Toss Today, you're definitely on Google Plus,
Yeah.
and yeah, so drop us any comments, questions, or requests that you might have for either one of us, and we'll keep trying to provide the best content that we possibly can for the schedules that we hold. So thank you very much, and we shall catch you all next time.
As I say, we will catch all of you sometime in the future.